Hello, I'm Boyd Hilton and welcome to this very special Royal Television Society 4 Lives preview Q&A event. 4 Lives, a 3-part drama that tells the story of the 4 men who were killed by Stephen Port, Anthony Walgate, Gabriel Cavari, Daniel Whitworth and Jack Taylor, and their families and friends who worked tirelessly to find out what happened to them. Stephen Port received a life sentence with a whole life order in November 2016, and an inquest into the 4 murders concluded only last week with the jury ruling that failings by the Met Police contributed to the deaths of Port's final 3 victims. The incredibly powerful series starts at 9 p.m. on Monday the 3rd of January, airing across 3 consecutive nights on BBC One, with all episodes available as a box set on iPlayer straight away. Let's meet today's panel. We have writer and exec producer Neil McKay, exec producer Jeff Pope, Stephen Merchant, who plays Stephen Port, and Jaime Winstone, who plays Donna Taylor. Welcome.
Hello.
Hi, Jeff. Let me start with you. You are, I think you're a preeminent producer / writer of TV drama dealing with real events, real people, real crimes, real victims. Did you have any? What was it about this particular story that made you want to get involved with telling it? And what was the initial spark that you wanted to make this particular show?
Well, I think the first thing we have to do is pay tribute to Piers Wenger, who's the controller of drama at the BBC, who rarely for Neil and I came to us and asked us, what do you think about taking this idea on? And we researched it and we looked into it, and we always take a long time, Neil and I, before we gel with a story. But I think that we could see right away that here was a story where ordinary people had been utterly let down by the system. Initially, the police, but also I think the wider justice system. You know, I don't think the way this was handled, with delays to inquest, delays. I'm not talking about COVID delays, but the ridiculous amount of time it's taken for these families to get some justice. But I think what we felt was that here were 4 lives that had been brutally opened up to the most horrific public exposure. In one of the, all of them, Neil has said this many times, that if we were to drop down dead tomorrow, all of us secrets about us would emerge. And that's exactly what happened here. And these men had their private lives and the lives of their families exposed to the most cruel spotlight. And in the case of the last victim, Jack hadn't told his family that he was curious about men and attracted to men as the same as well as women. So this was all. They had themselves thrust into the spotlight when they didn't want to be. They had judgments made about them by the police. The police approached all of the murder investigations. Well, they weren't murder investigations. That's the whole problem. But all the investigations would approach with preconceived ideas about these men, and so we just felt there was a monumental failing on the part of the authorities, the justice system, the police. And that the way to tell this story was to come at it from that point of view, from the point of view of the families, and to faithfully record what happened to them at each step.
Neil, I mean, you and Jeff have worked on dramas dealing with crime and horrendous true stories before, but it strikes me this must have been full of even more sensitivities that you had to deal with, perhaps than anything you've done before. Is that fair? And what were the particular challenges of writing this?
Well, I think the challenges were that, well, certainly when we began it, it was, previously we've dramatized things which have been fairly recent, but this was when we began, at least, pretty raw and pretty recent, and the families had not got any answers. So it was a process really of, you know, just beginning at the beginning and meeting the families one by one, and dealing with what Jeff's just talked about in many cases, which was that, you know, there were some at least of the sexuality and of the private lives of some of these boys was hidden and buried, and, you know, we had to sort of have the families and relatives on our side, and that meant them being brave and courageous about, enormously brave and enormously courageous about telling the story as it really happened, so that you know, there was none of them made any attempt, none of the families or relatives made any attempt with us to kind of censor, don't say that, don't show that, don't show. So, you know, for example, with Anthony Walgate, he was a student, a fashion student. He did do a small amount of occasional escort work, and which he did for money, and he thought nothing very much of it. Now, his mother didn't know anything about that, and Sarah obviously had to deal with that coming out in public. Part of that coming out in public is us dramatizing it. You know, equally, his Anthony's dad hadn't been aware. He was certainly aware after he was murdered, but before he'd been murdered, was not aware that his son was gay. I think he thought he may have been. And so it's the sort of revealing of the secrets of the, and it was true with all four of them. There was, you know, deeply personal stuff. I mean, with Daniel Whitworth, you know, there was a sort of a privacy within his relationship with Ricky Wormsley, who I got to know very well, still in close touch with, who was Daniel's partner. You know, the sense they were about to buy a place together. Were they going to get married? Were they not going to get married? You know, did they have a future together? And there's a little bit of tension in the relationship. You know, it's not like it's all happy and fantastic. It's suddenly their lives are interrupted at a point where, you know, they've got a bit of a fracture in their relationship, and Ricky, you know, has to deal with us showing that. And I can't pay a strong enough tribute to all of the families for the way they've supported us and been so brave and courageous about us. You know, we're enormously privileged as writers, actors, directors to tell this story, and to, you know, we've just tried to be true to that responsibility.
And when it comes to depicting Stephen Port, it strikes me that I think you've struck a brilliant balance in not flinching from showing, you know, him and what he was responsible for, and not in an exploitative way. Is that something that you've learned over the years dealing with this kind of drama? And what
yes, absolutely. It's never ever for me about the psychology of, you know, Stephen Port or Fred West or whoever, you know, Brady and Hindley. It's never, these dramas are never ever, I don't have any interest. I don't care about their psychology or what motivates them. It's absolutely unknowable. It's, even if you knew it, it would be horrible and revolting. What these dramas are about is the impact it has on the rest of us, how we cope with it, how we cope with that sort of unknowability. And I think in terms of putting Stephen Port on the page with this, I felt, well, I don't know him, but I can describe him from the outside, and I can make his unknowability in a way the point of the drama. You know, he's a dreadful man who walks across all these lives without any kind of conscience or feeling, and an extraordinarily difficult task for an actor to engage with. And you know, in his way, Stephen has engaged with that character in the most sort of perfect way, which is that he's embraced the unknowability. I'm sure he'd be much more eloquent than me in talking about that. Perhaps that's a cue for you to ask him about that.
Yes, Steve. Well, I was going to ask as well, did you have any qualms about taking on such this role? I mean, or did you think, yeah, you can portray him in a way that Neil's talking about that is important and the drama needs to show?
Oh, you know, I think my initial hesitation was with, I mean, not that the gentlemen have ever done this before in their previous work, but I think there's always that anxiety about, is it going to sensationalize in any way, any kind of tabloidization of this person? And you know, as Neil said, that's certainly not what the script was. And you know, as I saw him when reading it, he was very much, I mean, I don't wish to sound glib, but it reminded me of the shark in Jaws, in the shark is unknowable and has, but the impact that the shark has on the community is what's of interest. And that's what Port is, in a sense, in that he is this slightly anonymous creature, but he's prowling around, just, you know, causing untold heartache. And so in the same way that I felt that the guys in the script had not editorialized the story, they were presenting it as you know, raw as way they could. I felt the same with Port, that he sort of, he is unknowable. So the most you can do is sort of try and render that sort of banality of evil that, you know, is a bit of a cliche, but it is. I mean, that's the thing, that the point about these people, even if he had confessed his crimes, his answers would, and they invariably are when you hear these people interviewed, is they are banal. They don't have any self-awareness, any insight into what they have done, or why it's happened. Either they're self-pitying or they're sort of cold and aloof, you know. And so to me, it was about, you know, not trying to kind of make him a twirly moustache villain, or even trying to be creepy, although I think he comes across as creepy. I was not setting out to do that. It was just, here is a man who is rather devoid of personality and buys dumper trucks online and sort of has few friends, and meanwhile is capable of abhorrent things. And so that was the approach. In terms of my anxiety as an actor, then yes, I mean, of course, very anxious to do justice to it and to do it well and to not embarrass myself. And it is obviously a very different thing for me. And on a selfish level, of course, that is part of the challenge of taking something like this on, is that it is sort of creatively challenging. And whereas Neil says he you know, he doesn't try to get into the psychology, you're forced, at least when you're playing a character like that, to at least try and imagine some internal life, particularly when you're doing scenes like the court trial. Because what is this person thinking? Are they aware they're lying? Have they concocted a reality for themselves now? Are they a sort of Machiavellian wizard who's weaving between truth and fact and fiction? So that's sort of creatively very challenging. But yeah, it's for others to judge whether it's convincing or not.
There is the scene where where Stephen Port takes his wig off and kind of, you know, I thought that was, I mean, it's a scene that, again, almost like, I feel like it felt kind of striking and interesting, and, you know, and yet you don't know what to make of it. It's just, Neil, in terms of why did you think it was important to include that scene particularly?
Well, I suppose because, you know, fundamentally, you know, this was part of his alter ego. Port was presenting himself as whatever age he claimed to be on the app, and wherever he claimed to come from, and this a whole other life he created for himself. And in fact, he wasn't that person. He was a you know, he was a person who basically disguised himself. Apparently, he also, I don't think our makeup artist Janet Horsfield ever did it, but Port used makeup quite heavily actually in real life, because he had concerns about his skin problem. Quite a lot of thick pancake kind of makeup apparently, and basically he was not who he claimed to be. And I suppose that was, the wig was a simple metaphor for that really. You know, the man you see in court is this apparently quite sober individual, you know, a bit dull, a bit plodding, but you wouldn't really have him down as anything other than, you know, sort of quite an ordinary person, you know. Whereas in fact online he's Joe Dean. He's got you know, he's got blonde hair and he's 25 or whatever it is. So I think it was a very simple metaphor for that, really. I think
it's very difficult to play Port because you can't play him utterly blank. And I as you were talking, Stephen, I was thinking of that scene in the cafe with I think it's with Ryan, where you're aware of his loneliness essentially, and there were just little tiny bits of humanity that the Stephen suffused the character with, which are really tough, because you're thinking, well, what am I supposed to think here? You know, it was right to do it because Port was not an android. You know, he was not a monster. So it was a incredibly difficult thing to. I mean, Stephen had to shave his hair off, and so physically it was a lot, but also it was tiny little things, like when your foot, Stephen plays him with his foot fidgeting when he's being interviewed. It was another metaphor for, because on the surface, nope, I didn't do it. Nope, not me. Nope, I didn't do it. But then the way David Blair shot it, you can just see that foot slightly twitching, and so you're aware there's something going on there. So it was a performance by tiny degrees, is how Stephen got him, I think.
Yeah, did it take you a while, Steve, to find the way in, to kind of get that? Because I think it does feel very kind of almost underplayed, and you know, you are completely avoiding him being considered like an obvious pantomime villain in any way. Did that take a while for you to reach, or was it there, you know, when you started filming?
Well, it was, the only way in really was the little bit of footage that exists of him being interviewed by the police, and the fact that we were recreating those scenes gave at least a jumping off point, because you know, you could at least look a little closely at the rhythm of his speech and his body language, and he does a lot of avoiding of eye contact and sort of looking down as if he's kind of studying these documents, these photos of these murdered people, as though somehow, you know, he's trying to be as helpful as he can. And I know he's in a very unique position in that situation, and he's under extraordinary circumstances, but that seemed a way of thinking about what is that person like in real life. Like you say, a person that's creating a different version of themselves online, who's wearing a toupee. This is not someone who's sort of gregarious and comfortable in their own skin. And so it's, and you know, using Neil's script as a sort of, as a reference, you know, he talks about his loneliness, he talks about people he works with not being comfortable with his sexuality and so on. Now, whether those are lies or not, you know, you suspect there's some truth to it, because he's sort of sharing it with one of his only friends. So it's in a sense trying to extrapolate the little bit you have from those interviews with the police and sort of wondering how that impacts in real life. And again, I don't know how accurate that is, but that seemed like the way to approach him, so that his shifting of eye contact and his sort of inability to make real connections with people, it seems a way into it. I mean, certainly, you know, given the crimes that he committed, it doesn't seem like someone who understands how to interact with human beings and treat them as humans.
Right. Jaime, you're playing a real person, and a real person who's kind of part of a whole group of friends and family of these men who are kind of heroic, aren't they? Did you meet the real Donna and the family, and if so, what did you kind of take from that process?
We did actually, at our request, and also I think it was over Jeff and Neil sort of encouraged it, for us to go and meet Donna and Jen. And on one hand, such an amazing experience as an actor to be able to actually go meet who you're going to play, to study them, but just also to have that actual insight from where they're coming from the heartbreak, from the mystery. They didn't even was aware of his bisexuality or of his curiosity. It was from get-go a real challenge, because when you're playing someone real and you're dealing with a conversation and a topic that so desperately needs to happen in society when it comes to dealing with the LGBTQ community, and how it was dismissed. And obviously I remember when it happened, and how shocked we were, and sort of how, hang on a minute, why are people not connecting the dots, and how could this happen? How could this slip through the drain so easily? And then also bringing it back to, well, actually, that's my opinion, and that's the world's opinion, that's the media, but where where is Donna coming from? So to be able to sit down with them and hear firsthand their experience and their relationship with their brother was a true honor. And for me, it was a double-edged sword, because it encouraged me to sort of do what's right for the family and pay respects and an honor to the script. And we're in such great hands with Jeff and Neil and David, and such an amazing cast, that we just all got to sort of leave those sort of egos at home, or not even egos, that sort of, right, I'm going to play this and this is how I want to portray it. There was really no room for that. It was just straight down the line, factual, this is what happened, no over dramatization, no over the top expressing. It was just very true and honest and precious stuff. And you know, the sort of activist in me, or the large voice in me that, you know, wants to stand up for the gay community and the LGBT community, you know, I had to kind of strip that back quite a lot, because I just wanted to stay true to the character and Donna and the facts of what happened in this initial case, because obviously the subject matter is huge and it's going to forever send ripples through this country, I think, with how it was dealt and dismissed, because they pigeonholed a whole race of queer men, you know, and obviously that they take this drug, and, you know, obviously they know about it, because, you know, I had to really strip that back and just take on what I'd got from Donna, which was just this broken family and a massive hole left in this amazingly strong family. I mean, all the families are so strong. I think Neil and Jeff touched on that about how they are exposed, and when someone is murdered, you know, they are automatically put under the light, and that's an extremely intimidating, brave thing that they've all done, and to finally get justice, or some sort of justice. So it was a real honor and scary, but also an amazing role to be able to take part in, and an important film to be a part of.
And did it take time to earn their trust of Donna and her family, or were they really, you know, keen on getting this out there, getting the truth of this whole situation out there?
They were, you know, admittedly super nervous. I think they had done a documentary before on, which was very helpful for me as well, just to study body language and just try and stay as true to the character as possible. But yeah, you know, they'd essentially been fucked over, you know, by the world, by the institution. So yeah, there was a stiff upper lip, and, you know, once I we've related quite quickly on a level, from them being Dagenham and my family from East, and just trying to warm up, you know, that I'm dedicated to you. Yes, this is a drama. Yes, it's ITV, BBC, and there's loads of great people involved, but, you know, I'm doing this for you and for your story to be told. And, you know, they're really wonderful, inspirational women, and they did a lot of work on this case. And, you know, it was nothing a bottle of wine didn't sort of break the ice with, and they're really amazing mums, amazing strong women, and I found them highly inspirational. And I actually took great comfort from them being on set, which I thought was just initially very scary and weird, and too close to home almost, but actually it really worked. I just felt this support of, you know, what you're doing is right. I mean, at one point she was, you know, she said, "Oh God, you're so like me," and she burst into tears. I burst into tears, but it was just this. I think it was Neil that said it earlier. This finally just having their words and their story told is just, you know, monumental in this case. So yeah, amazing women, and I'm truly honoured to play Donna, and I'm really proud of what we've done.
Jeff, I watched the press conference last week when the inquest verdict came in. I thought it was incredible to see. It must be odd for you to, producer of the series, to see them. Was this what you've been waiting a long time for that, haven't you? That moment where that result came through, and it must have been a very weird position to have the drama in the bag, but waiting for this all to resolve itself.
Incredibly painful, Boyd, because we knew when we'd finished it and we cut it, and we just thought, wow, we really need this to go out there, and the families too. And it was so painful. I mean, partly, a big chunk of it was COVID. The rest of it was just how dysfunctional the justice system is as well, how things take unacceptably long time. And the only light for us has been that, having waited all this time, finally we transmit at a time when the story is right there, centre and front again. Because I was going to say something. The whole point about this is that Stephen Port was no criminal mastermind. How Stephen played him was exactly right. It was just this kind of, did you murder these men? No cleverness or anything. Just he was not any kind of criminal mastermind. And yet he ran rings around the Metropolitan Police, utterly ran rings around them. I think he must have thought, he couldn't have believed it when, and then he rings up and says, there's a young lad outside. I've just seen him. He doesn't look very well. Someone needs to come. So this was the person that he'd murdered. It was Anthony. They traced the call to him. Excuse me, you rang earlier and it was you. Oh, yes. Yeah. And then it's like, how was this man allowed to continue murdering after the murder of Anthony? And I shudder to think what's been happening. That's the most, sorry, it's a long way of saying the most frustrating thing is what has been happening in the 2 years since we were ready to transmit this drama and now, because I don't believe that all the glib assurances that we were given by the Met that, we've got everything, our house is in order now, I don't believe it. And I think this inquest needed to happen, and then our drama series needed to transmit, and they need to be clubbed around the head to stop this happening again, because I don't believe them. That's why, I shouldn't allow my personal feelings to come into it, but I think it's been frustrating that something as important as this has been held back for 2 years, and I wonder the hell has been happening in those 2 years. Have there been more Stephen Ports?
Well, to pick up on what Jeff's saying, I think what's chilling, aside from the murders, is the fact that this family are knocking on the door saying, we want to help, ask us questions, look about this doesn't make sense, we know our sons, we know our brothers, we're here to help, we're not trying to get in the way. It's not going around knocking on doors trying to get people, and people close slamming the doors, I don't want to get involved. People are begging to offer information. And to me, when I was reading it, it's like, this is not Stalin's Russia. This is not Chile in the 1970s, where people disappear and then you can't get answers from the authorities because there's a sort of malevolent bureaucracy at work. This is a country that prides itself on its sort of democracy. And so it's not malevolence, it's a lack of communication, it's incompetence, it's mismanagement, it's a lack of joined up thinking, it's mediocre people in higher positions of authority. And that's really chilling. And it's not only in the police, it infects, institutions everywhere. And again, it's not trying to pin the blame on anyone in particular. It's saying there's a fundamental fracture in the way these organizations are being run that is unnerving and chilling for all of us. And I think it's not about trying to get one or two bad apples fired, because that's just an easy answer. The structures, there's something that's not working in the structures. And because we all depend on them, even more so in COVID, it's worrying if we don't ask questions of how these things are being run. And like Jeff says, when it's sort of, that they can delay and then they can say, well, it's okay, we've sorted it out now. We saw where it went wrong. The email system was faulty, but we sorted, it's whatever pat excuse can be given. It's like, well, no, that's not That's not what the problem is. And we need to look, as a nation, we have to ask these questions. And drama is one of the few ways to actually bring it into the public debate in a really open and visible way.
Yeah.
Watching the series, I do, and watching the press conference, and clearly listening to the families and friends, it does strike me, Neil, that, and you bring this out very, I think, very clearly in the drama, that the fact that they were gay or, you know, LGBTQ guys, that affected this investigation. That did affect the way the police dealt with it.
Yes, yeah, no question. I mean, not necessarily a case of overt prejudice, but absolutely a case of ignorance. And you know, I've got friends in the police, you know, who've been senior murder detectives, and they will say, in all honesty, off the record, there is a hierarchy in terms of how murders are investigated, and which group of people are at the top of that and which are at the bottom. And there's no question in my mind that gay men, young gay men, are right down at the bottom in terms of priority. So, you know, with just looking at some of the specifics of this story, when Anthony Walgate was found outside Port's flat, Port had previously been questioned on suspicion of rape of a young male. The case hadn't progressed because that young man in the end decided he didn't want to do it, but there was all on record, and it turned out from the inquest that you know, that certainly some of those officers immediately knew about that. But there's the sort of notion was, broadly speaking, well, young gay men, they go on apps, they engage in risky sex, they probably all use this GHB drug, and a kind of a homogenization of individuals. And as Stephen's just said, you know, actually all the police really needed to do was listen to the people who knew those young men, listen to them, hear the story of what that young man was like. Who was he? What was his personality? What did he do and what didn't he do, rather than making kind of broad assumptions. And so in my mind, I wouldn't necessarily say I've seen anything that is overtly anti-gay, but what there is a deep indifference to lifestyle, a deep ignorance, and a presumption that there's a line that Ricky Walmsley has in the drama somewhere when he's first told that his partner Daniel has been found dead, initially told he'd been hung, you know, unbelievably, or hung himself, should I say, and then found that he was, you know, slumped against a wall in a cemetery, and he's asked about the drug, and he didn't know what it was. He literally didn't know, and he honestly didn't. He'd not heard of it. I mean, probably more people have now, but he literally, and he has a line where he just says, "We're not all gay people aren't the same," and you know, that is what we've tried to do in the drama. Of course, these lives are all interrupted cruelly and brutally, but what we've tried to do via the stories of the relatives and the people who love them is create a picture of them as people, not as collateral, you know. And I think that's but you know, other people may watch the drama and think, see overt homophobia. Some may see none at all. And in a way, I'm happy for people for us to tell the story straight and let people make their own judgments.
Jeff, was it a legal minefield just to have, you know, in the way that particularly the way you deal with the police? Because I think it does feel very unflinching in the way you show, you know, the family liaison officer doesn't go and see Sarah Smith, played by Sheridan Smith, for ages and ages. That alone is shocking. It was shocking to me anyway. Did you have lots of issues?
If you had to boil it down to a quintessential scene, I think it's that. Matt, you know, you've lost a loved member of your family, and no one seems to care. No one's, hang on, excuse me, can you tell me what's happened? You know, with my son, my son has died. You haven't rung me. I mean, anyway, yes, it was complicated legally because we did not want, by dint of being careless or sloppy or allowing emotions to find their way into our work, we didn't want to make that a release valve. You know, if we wanted to treat the the police side of the story as to be as accurate and as careful and as painstaking as we were with the families. For that reason, we didn't want anyone to come back and say, you got that bit wrong. And therefore, by extension, the whole thing is inaccurate. You know, that would have that would have been the stick to beat us with. So we were very careful, and we decided very early that the POV, the point of view, was the families, and therefore we only see the police when they saw them, and they only react with the police in the way they did. We don't have scenes at Barking and Dagenham CID with them deciding what to do, because we're not party to that. And it was a wise choice, because it meant that you absolutely understood what was happening from the emotional point of view, from the family's point of view. And it meant that when it came to the inquest, which Neil followed every single day of it, you know, the transcripts, because we, again, did not want, you know, we thought, will we have to change stuff? Will there be scenes that we need to re-edit because new stuff's emerged? And it wasn't the case. It was because each police scene we'd got from 2 or 3 different angles already. So we knew we were strong on that ground. And then the rest of it, which was utterly horrific, in our story is off screen. You know, the reason why a very inexperienced family liaison officer is assigned, we're not party to that, but what we're party to is Sarah Sack, who's lost her son, dealing with someone who has no real idea how to proceed.
Yeah, it's incredible. Jamie, did you watch the press conference after the inquest verdict came in? And I just guess, do you think you've got this connection now to this family, to, you know, the real person you played, into the whole case, really? And that, you know, is it something you're gonna, you know, you'll maintain an interest in?
Sorry, I missed the first bit of that question. I'm so sorry.
I was wondering whether you got to watch the press conference that the families gave after the inquest verdict last week.
Yes, I did. I mean, to be honest, I'm in contact with the girls more. That's our relationships kind of developed into a more of a keeping each other in the loop. And, you know, I follow them both and have been since we've shot it, because there's such a strong bond there, and also a level of respect that we need to maintain, especially when it comes to the press side of things, and, you know, posting trailers and stuff like that. You know, I just want to make sure that that's always okay with them, and, you know, that we're in a good place. Yeah, I haven't spoken about it in depth with them. I tend to give them a lot of space, because they're processing so much, and they still will. They will forever. But I think, you know, there's a sense of relief and a real sense of, you know, grieving that they can now do in a respectful way, rather than constantly chasing the media or having this personal battle with themselves. So yeah, I mean, they're doing great, and they're a really beautiful family, and, you know, I'm honoured to know them.
And Stephen, I guess this feels like it's not like a normal acting job, that there are so many ramifications from, you know, what really happened. Do you take a continuing interest in, you know, in the inquest result, and how the families reacted, and how the families are going to react to this series?
I do, in fact. You know, I mean, I've my only other experience of a true life tale, as it were, is doing my film about a family of wrestlers, which is obviously a much lighter subject. But in doing that, you become very immersed in the family, and you end up feeling a connection with them that sort of long exists, the making of the film, and you know, you end up, whether it's social media or whatever, you feel like you've had some involvement in their lives. And although I'm very indirect, unlike Jamie in this story, yes, you can't help but feel not part of the tale, but kind of, yes, but it's on your radar in a way that you've spent so much time thinking about, and it's not a news story which you read through and you have an immediate reaction and it moves on. It sort of lives with you in a way, and it has for these last few years. And I mean, aside from the frustration of the show not being aired, just the frustration of this of this saga going on for these people, and unable to get answers and unable for it to be resolved. And I don't know how you move forward in your life. I mean, it's incredible. And I think again, it's, you know, we've seen so much TV in which the heroes are police detectives who are brilliant and committed, and you know, Jamie's character and her sister just refusing to take no for an answer and saying, well, let's look at, can we see the CCTV? No, well, can we look at the CCTV? Well, is that my brother? Or is that someone else? Asking those fundamental questions, which seem so pedestrian, which seem like armchair detection, that we, if we were watching this in real time, we would be asking the same questions. It's like you're living this true crime podcast thinking, well, how am I in this situation? And they become heroic for asking the most pedestrian questions. And all this glorification of the police and detectives. And I'm not trying, I don't have an urge to demonize the police, but the idea that you can, that these people, that they are in their small way heroic because they're helping to solve a crime that paid professionals should have solved. I mean, they are heroic in that small way. And I think that's to be celebrated and admired. And like I said before, it's also chilling that it was left to the families to keep on asking questions because the authorities weren't doing it. I mean, that's something we should all be unsettled by.
The suicide note. Don't blame it on that fella. You know, that there's a suicide note, but they don't allow the family to look at it and identify their son's handwriting. They won't allow Ricky to identify his partner's handwriting. Stephen said it's not, you know, brilliant detective work. It's utterly basic.
That's almost blackly comic.
That
you've written a suicide note. You have, as a murderer, have written a fake suicide note, and you've said in it, "Oh, and don't worry about that guy that you might think is the murderer." I mean, it's laughable.
Yeah.
And any one of us looking at that would think that, hang on a minute, we should let's call him in.
Yeah.
A quick word. To accept that, to just simply say, "Oh, that must be it then."
Yeah.
I mean, it's extraordinary.
There's so many milestones, and every point of investigation, if that's what you want to call it, is a major fuck up or a major mishap, and you're like, these foundations are just completely crumbling on every murder. It just gets worse and worse, and you just think, how has this slipped through their fingers? How is this? But it did.
It is unbelievably infuriating to watch it play out. Neil, we have to wrap up. But what do you want audiences to take away from this series in the end? What do you think we need to learn from it?
I think what I'd say two things. One of them Stephen's alluded to. I do think the failures in these police investigations of these four lads, I think it's in almost every institution at the moment. You see it in the Manchester Arena bombing. Almost every single institution involved in that failed because people don't take personal responsibility. People are terribly, terribly timid these days, and they work within a structure of an organization. And in the end, what I think is important is that people take, even if you step outside the structure of whatever organization you're in, step outside and show a little bit of courage and say, I don't believe that, or I don't agree with that, not just to play safe and take your paycheck at the end of the week. And the other thing is just, I think I've said it before, you know, these four lives mattered, and we've tried to do justice to them. You know, they all die fairly soon after we meet them, but I hope that we've shown that they were human beings and they were as loved as anybody could have been. And you know, what I didn't want was this drama to be just thoroughly depressing and awful and you know, scandalous. Of course, you know, it's a scandalous set of events. But you know, there's that line of, is it Philip Larkin, what survives of us is love, and what survives of all these four boys, and it's in the hearts of their families and their relatives, is the love they had for them. And that's, you know, that's what I wanted. That's where I wanted us to end up. You know, not just this was a bad investigation, but these people were loved, and that matters.
Well said.
Yeah, brilliant. I think that comes through totally. Thanks so much, Stephen, Jamie, Neil, and Jeff. And just a reminder to everyone watching that the series starts 9 o'clock, Monday, the 3rd of January, BBC One across 3 nights and on a box iPlayer as well. And congratulations on an incredible job, because I thought it was
Thanks, Paul.